Hello there, I'm Rachel with the Charlotte Mason Plenary. Thank you for joining me for another video on finding your way with Charlotte Mason's 20 principles. Today we're talking about principle number 4, the sacredness of personality. These principles, authority and docility, are limited by the respect due to the personality of children, which may not be encroached upon whether by the direct use of fear or love, suggestion or influence, or by undue play upon any one natural desire. So in this principle, Charlotte put some limits on us in how we can implement principle 3 that we studied last time, the principles of authority and obedience. But I also think that this principle is really closely related to principle 1, that children are born persons. And that's because in chapter 5 of volume 6, she starts off with this quote. People are too apt to use children as counters in a game, to be moved hither and thither according to the whim of the moment. Our crying need today is less for a better method of education than for an adequate conception of children. So in this chapter, Charlotte is warning us about how we tend to encroach upon the personality of children and in all the different ways that we do it. So before we jump in and look at the actual chapter, let's first look at the definition of the word encroachment. To enter by gradual steps or by stealth into the possessions or rights of another, or to advance beyond the usual or proper limits. Wow, so those are some really strong words, and I bet you're thinking, how could we ever encroach upon our children as parents? Well, Charlotte says there are actually 5 ways that we encroach upon the personalities of our children without even really realizing that we're doing it. And the 5 ways are fear, love, suggestion, influence, and playing upon a child's natural desires. So all 4 of those things hinder a child's ability to develop a strong character, to do what is right simply because it's the right thing to do. So the first one is fear, and she cites 2 characters from the novel David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. For the action of fear as a governing motive, we cannot do better than read again our David Copperfield, a great educational treatise, and study Mr. Creakle in detail for terrorism in the schoolroom, and Mr. Murdstone for the same vice in the home. And the next one is love. But how could our love for our children, or our child's love for us, be an encroachment upon their personality? Well, Charlotte says that we do it unknowingly when we use tactics like, do this for mama, please. So let's look at the quote. Encroachment upon the love of children offers as a motive, do this for my sake. Wrong is to be avoided lest it grieve the teacher. Good is to be done to pleasure him. For this end, a boy learns his lessons, behaves properly, shows goodwill, produces a whole catalog of schoolboy virtues, and yet his character is being undermined. So as you know, a child will sometimes obey you simply because he loves you, but that is undermining his ability to develop a strong will. Now the next one on the list is suggestion. How is it possible for stability of mind and character to evolve under a continual play of changing suggestions? He is acquiring no strength to stand alone, but waits in all his doings for promptings from without. Perhaps the gravest danger attending this practice is that every suggestion received lays the person open to the next and the next. A due respect for the personality of children and a dread of making them incompetent to conduct their own lives will make us chary of employing a means so dangerous, no matter how good the immediate end. The next one is influence. Late in the last century, goody-goody books were written about the beauty of influence, the duty of influence, the study of the means of influence, and children were brought up with the notion that to influence other persons consciously was a moral duty. No doubt such influence is inevitable. We must needs affect one another, not so much by what we do or say, as by that which we are, and so far influence is natural and wholesome. We imbibe it from persons real and imaginary, and we are kept strong and upright by currents and countercurrents of unstudied influence. But supineness before a single, steady, persistent influence is a different matter. and the schoolgirl who idolizes her mistress, the boy who worships his master, is deprived of the chance of free and independent living. His personality fails to develop, and he goes into the world as a parasitic plant, clinging ever to the support of some stronger character. Now, the final way in which we encroach upon a child's personality is by playing upon the child's natural desires. Now, the three things that we just talked about, love, suggestion, and influence, Charlotte says are kind of incidental, because now she is getting to, I'm going to read the quote, she is getting to a more pervasive ways of stultifying intellectual and moral growth. Those are pretty strong words, because she says when you play with a child's natural desires, you are playing with fire. Because natural desires can be healthy, but if they get out of balance, they can really be disastrous. And so she lists the 6 natural desires that we have to watch out for. And they are the desire for approbation, emulation, avarice, power and ambition, society, and knowledge. So let's take them one by one. The first one is approbation. Now, this is the need for approval or recognition. And we all have this desire, right? We all want to be liked and we all want to be validated. But Charlotte says that the problem comes when vanity gets mixed in. This desire for approval may get such possession of him that he thinks of nothing else. He must have approval, whether from the worthless or the virtuous. It is supposed that outbreaks of violence, robbery, assassinations occur at times for the mere sake of infamy, just as deeds of heroism are done for the sake of fame. Both infamy and fame mean being thought about and talked about by a large number of people, and we know how this natural desire is worked by the daily press. How we get now a film actress, now a burglar, a spy, a hero, or a scientist set before us to be our admiration and our praise. So the next one is emulation. And you would think that this would be a good thing, right? To emulate somebody that we admire. But Charlotte is talking about the kind that makes us want to surpass others. In other words, she's talking about competition. Emulation, the desire of excelling, works wonders in the hands of a schoolmaster, and indeed this natural desire is an amazing spur to effort, both intellectual and moral. In the intellectual field, however, there is a danger, and nothing worse could have happened to our schools than a system of marks, prizes, place-taking, by which many of them are practically governed. A boy is so taken up with the desire to forge ahead that there is no time to think of anything else. What he learns is not interesting to him. He works to get his remove. Now the next one is avarice, and that is defined often as greed or the extreme need to acquire wealth. But Charlotte says that it can also be in simple things like the need for getting a scholarship. He must get a scholarship is the duty of a small boy even before he goes to school, and teachers and parents order their very strenuous work towards the end in view. It is hard to say what better could be done, and yet this deliberate cult of cupidity is disastrous, for there is no doubt that here and there we come upon impoverishment of personality due to enfeebled intellectual life. The boy did not learn to delight in knowledge in his school days, and the man is shallow in mind and whimsical in judgment. The next one is power and ambition. Power is good in proportion as it gives opportunities for serving, but it is mischievous in boy or man when the pleasure of ruling or managing becomes a definite spring of action. Like each of the other natural desires, that for power may ruin a life that it is allowed to master. Ambition is the cause of half the disasters under which mankind suffers. Now the next one is society, and here Charlotte is talking again about the class system in England and how an inferior education can hinder a student later in life. Every boy has a princely right to be brought up so that he may hold his own in good society, that is, the society of those who know. We hear complaints of the cast iron system of British society, but how much of it is due to the ignorance which makes it only possible to men and women to talk to those of their own clique, soldiers with soldiers, schoolmasters and schoolboys with their kind. The boy who wants to be able to talk to people who know has no unworthy motive for working. And the last one is knowledge. It so happens that the last desire we have to consider, the desire of knowledge, is commonly deprived of its proper function in our schools. So besotted is our educational thought that we believe children regard knowledge rather as repulsive medicine than as inviting food. Hence our dependence on marks and prizes, athletics, alluring presentation, any jam we can devise to disguise the powder. The man who willfully goes on crutches has feeble, incompetent legs. He who chooses to go blindfolded has eyes that cannot bear the sun. He who lives on pap meat has weak digestive powers, and he whose mind is sustained by the crutches of emulation and avarice loses that one stimulating power which is sufficient for his intellectual needs. This atrophy of desire of knowledge is the penalty our scholars pay because we have chosen to make them work for inferior ends. So we got through all of them. So each one of those encroachments hinders a child from developing a strong will, the strong character to be a master of his desires rather than a slave to them. But that's a long list of don'ts. How are you supposed to remember them all in your day-to-day, everyday life? Well, I've made a list of them for you, and you can download it as a PDF over on the Plenary website, along with the reading for this principle, Chapter 5 of Volume 6. So what does Charlotte say we are supposed to do instead? We should make the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake the object of our educational efforts. Okay, so for homework, post your list of encroachments somewhere that you can see it every single day, and then just be mindful of when you might be using one of those to obtain obedience. Now, if you have any questions, please post them here or over in the Plenary Facebook group so that we can chat about it. And if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure to click the little bell so you get notifications about each new video in the Principle series. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to chat with you soon.